Cara Vance didn't mean to start her morning by saving a stranger's spot in line. She was just being nice. But the second she tapped his shoulder and said, "I can hold your place if you need to step out for a second," her entire life took a turn. It was hot for early spring in Manhattan, and the line for the new underground bakery pop-up on Mercer Street snaked around the block. Cara, dressed in her usual thrifted jeans and paint-splattered sneakers, had been standing behind a guy who looked completely out of place. Tailored navy coat, expensive leather shoes, and that sharp kind of jaw you only saw in magazines. He looked like he'd just stepped out of a boardroom, not like someone who would wait in line for croissants. He blinked at her, surprised. "You do that," she shrugged. "Yeah, I'm not in a rush, just don't take an hour or anything." He gave her a crooked smile. "I won't, 5 minutes." "Tops." She nodded and watched him disappear down the street. She didn't know his name, didn't know that 5 minutes from now she'd be thinking about him more than she should. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Cara was about to give up and step forward when he returned, slightly breathless, holding a coffee in one hand and a paper bag in the other. "I brought you something," he said, offering her the coffee. She blinked. "You didn't have to, you saved my spot." "Least I could do." He handed her the bag too. "There's a lemon scone in there. I don't know if you're into citrus, but it was the best looking thing in the shop." She took it reluctantly. "Thanks." "You didn't poison it, right?" "No, I saved that for the second date," he said with a straight face, then laughed. "I'm Nolan Cross, Cara Vance." They shook hands. His was warm, strong. She ignored the flutter in her stomach. "So, Cara Vance," he said as they stepped forward in line, "what do you do when you're not rescuing helpless men in pastry lines?" "I'm an artist," she said. "Trying to be anyway. I work at a framing shop uptown, pays the rent." "Barely." He studied her. "What kind of art?" She shrugged. "Mixed media mostly, lots of color. Not exactly what galleries want right now." "I'd love to see it sometime." She raised an eyebrow. "You don't even know me." "True, but I know what it's like to chase something you care about." Something about the way he said it made her pause. There was a sadness under his charm, something she couldn't quite place. They got their pastries and sat on the curb to eat. She couldn't remember the last time she laughed that much with someone she'd just met. He was funny in that dry, clever way, thoughtful too. He asked about her art like he actually cared. She didn't ask what he did. She figured he was probably in finance or something boring. She didn't know he was the co-founder of Crosswell Holdings, or that his net worth was somewhere north of $50 million. He didn't offer it. And she didn't ask. They ended up walking through Soho for hours, bouncing from street art murals to little galleries. He bought her a pretzel from a vendor even though they'd already eaten. She told him about the time she accidentally sold a painting she hated and the buyer hung it upside down. He told her about his childhood obsession with building treehouses and how he missed doing something with his hands. When they reached the park, she noticed the time and stopped. "I should go. I've got to get to work." Nolan looked disappointed. "Can I see you again?" She hesitated. "You don't even know if I'm crazy yet," he grinned. "I'm willing to take the risk." She gave him her number. "Don't make me regret it. You won't." As she walked away, Nolan stood there watching her. The truth was he hadn't planned on talking to anyone today. He just needed to clear his head, escape the office, breathe something that didn't smell like mahogany and money. Cara felt like the first real thing in a long time. By the time he returned to his penthouse, glass walls, sweeping views of the skyline, and floors so clean they reflected the lights, he was still thinking about her. And Cara. She was smiling the entire subway ride to work, wondering why a stranger's laugh had lodged itself in her chest like it belonged there. Neither of them knew it yet, but something had started that morning in line, and it wasn't going away. Cara wasn't expecting to hear from Nolan again. People said things in the moment, "Can I see you again? Let's hang out sometime," and never followed through. That was just New York, fast, fleeting, full of promises no one kept. So when he showed up at her framing shop 3 days later, holding a canvas wrapped in butcher paper, she dropped the box of matboard in her hands. "Sorry," he said, stepping around the mess. "Didn't mean to startle you." She stared at him. "How did you even know I worked here?" "You told me," he said. Uptown framing shop, took a few guesses, this is the third one I've tried. She narrowed her eyes. Are you stalking me? I prefer the term persistent. He held out the wrapped canvas. I need this framed. Thought maybe I could get a discount if I brought it to someone I sort of know. She took it from him cautiously. Is it stolen? Only emotionally. It's a piece I bought years ago. It's been sitting in my closet because I never got around to framing it. Figured I'd finally do something about that. She peeled back the paper just enough to see a stormy abstract in deep blues and grays. It was good, better than she expected. You've got taste, she said. This is by Leighton Calhoun. He's kind of a big deal. Is he? Nolan asked, looking genuinely curious. I just liked how it made me feel, like something was unraveling. She blinked at him. That wasn't the kind of thing people said about art, not unless they meant it. I'll need a few days, she said. We're short-staffed. No rush. He glanced around at the narrow shop, its cluttered shelves and scuffed floor. Do you always work alone? Usually. My manager's on leave, and the guy who was supposed to cover quit last week. So it's just me for now. He nodded once, then looked at her again, really looked. You didn't seem tired the other day. I wasn't working a double the other day. Want to grab lunch when you're done, she hesitated. You don't have a job. I do, he said. I just don't like it very much. That wasn't what she expected. She thought he'd say finance or tech or something that sounded like spreadsheets and glass towers, but he didn't elaborate, just waited. Kara set the canvas behind the counter. Fine. But I'm picking the place. Deal. She took him to a cafe around the corner that served noodles in mismatched bowls and had ceiling fans that barely worked. The owner knew her name and brought them tea without asking. Nolan didn't complain about the cracked leather seats or the chipped mugs. He asked questions, real ones. Do you ever think about leaving New York? Sometimes, she said. But I'd miss the way it smells after rain and the weird people on the subway and the fact that I can be invisible if I want to. Invisible? He asked, sipping his tea. Yeah. Here, no one cares who you are. You could be a millionaire or homeless and people would still push past you without looking up. He didn't answer right away, just watched her with a quiet kind of intensity. What about you? She asked finally. Why don't you like your job? He leaned back, folding his arms. Because it stopped being about building things and started being about protecting things. Assets, portfolios, risk mitigation, it's all caution now. No fire. You want fire. I want to make something that matters. She didn't say anything, but something in her chest shifted when they left the cafe. He paid without asking. She noticed he used a black card, the kind that didn't have a logo. She didn't comment, but it lingered in her mind. The next time she saw him, it was a week later. He showed up again, this time carrying 2 coffees and a sketchbook. I thought maybe you'd show me some of your art, he said. Kara hesitated. Showing her work was like peeling back her skin, but there was something about the way he asked. Like he wouldn't flinch if it was ugly. She brought him to the back room of the shop, where her easels leaned against the wall and paint tubes were crammed into every corner. She flipped through a few canvases, letting him look. She didn't explain them, just let them speak. He was quiet. Then he pointed to one, a piece layered in torn paper and oil, a woman standing at the edge of a cliff with no visible face. That one, he said. It's like she's waiting for something that might not come. Kara turned to him, startled. That's exactly what it's about. He looked at her, and for a second it felt like the air between them had thinned. Can I buy it? She shook her head. It's not for sale. Why not? Because it's me. Nolan didn't push, just nodded once like he understood. Later, when he left, he didn't try to touch her. Didn't lean in or make a move. He just said, "Thanks for showing me," and walked out. Kara stood there long after the door had closed, heart beating too fast, wondering why she felt like she'd just handed him a piece of herself. And why it didn't scare her more. Kara didn't expect to find Nolan waiting outside the gallery on Thursday night. She thought he was joking when he asked if he could come, half a tease, the way people say, invite me, when they don't mean it. But there he was, leaned against the brick wall in a charcoal coat, hands in his pockets, watching her through the drizzle. You came, she said, tugging the hood of her sweatshirt tighter to keep the rain off her curls. I said I would. You also said you don't like events, she replied, stepping closer. I don't. He glanced at the glowing windows behind her. But I figured I'd make an exception. Inside, the gallery buzzed with the usual Thursday night energy artists pretending not to care who was buying and collectors pretending to understand what they saw. Kara had dropped off her piece that morning, one of her newer works stitched with thread and strips of old maps. She hadn't expected it to get a good spot, but it was dead center in the second room, facing the main window. She led Nolan through the crowd slowly. He didn't try to network or name drop. He just stayed close, his gaze moving from piece to piece with quiet focus. When they reached hers, he tilted his head slightly, studying the overlapping paths and faded cities. "What made you use maps?" he asked without looking away. "They were my dad's," she said after a pause. "He was a trucker, collected them from everywhere he went. I found a box of them after he passed. Thought, maybe if I stitched them together, I could make sense of all the places he'd been." He looked at her then, and for a beat, the noise of the gallery faded. "Did he ever teach you to drive a truck?" he tried. "I backed over a mailbox." He smiled, but it was softer than before. A woman in a fitted dress stepped between them with a wine glass and a pointed smile. "Nolan Cross," she said, her gaze flicking to Kara briefly. "Didn't expect to see you here. Are you collecting again?" Kara blinked. Cross, she hadn't known his last name until now. "I'm here with someone," he replied, his voice polite but cool, the woman's brows lifted slightly. "Of course. Well, if you're in the market, I just launched a new series. I'll send you a preview." He gave a nod and she drifted away, heels clicking. Kara turned to him. "So you do collect, sometimes, quietly, and people know your name." He didn't flinch. "I didn't hide it. You didn't offer it either. I didn't want to change how you looked at me." She studied him. "Why would your name change anything? Because people hear it and see headlines. Or bank statements, not me." She folded her arms. "And what should I see?" He stepped closer. Someone who waited in line for a kwasa, who wanted to talk to a woman holding a sketchbook, not a business plan. Kara held his gaze. She should be angry. He wasn't exactly honest. But the truth was, he never claimed to be broke. She'd just assumed, and he didn't act like any rich man she'd ever met. "You should have told me," she said finally. "I know." She turned away, pretending to examine a sculpture of welded steel. "So what do you do exactly, Mr. Cross?" He hesitated. "I built a tech investment firm. We fund startups that can scale quickly, AI, renewable infrastructure, that kind of thing." Sounds like a lot of spreadsheets. "It is, which is why I like being around people who don't care about that." She glanced sideways. "You mean people who won't ask you for money?" He gave a quiet laugh. "That too." They walked the rest of the gallery in silence. Kara's mind buzzed. Nolan Cross. She'd heard the name before, probably in some article or podcast she half listened to. It explained the black card, the tailored coat. The way he never seemed rushed, like time bent around him. When they stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The city glistened under the streetlights and cabs splashed past in waves of dirty water. "Let me take you somewhere," he said. She hesitated. "Where?" "Somewhere warm. Away from this noise." Before she could protest, a black car pulled up. Not a cab, not an Uber. A sleek, silent town car with a driver who stepped out and opened the door. Kara blinked. "You called a car?" "I didn't want you to walk home wet." She climbed in, heart pounding. The interior smelled like leather and cedar. The seats were soft enough to sink into. They drove uptown, past the glowing towers and shuttered boutiques, until the car slowed in front of a building she'd never noticed before, modern, all glass and steel, with a private elevator that opened directly from the car lobby. Nolan led her inside. No doorman, no other residents in sight. "This is where you live?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Top floor." They stepped into the elevator, and her reflection stared back at her from every wall. She looked small next to him, underdressed, out of place, but he didn't look at her like she didn't belong. When the doors opened, she stepped into the kind of apartment that didn't feel real. Wide open, floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space, revealing the skyline in every direction. A grand piano sat near the corner. Bookshelves lined the opposite wall. Everything was sleek but not sterile. Art hung on the walls, real art, not prints. She turned to him slowly. "Why did you really bring me here?" Nolan stepped into the living room and set his keys on a marble tray. "Because I wanted you to know the truth. All of it." And I wanted to do it here where I can't pretend to be anything else. Kara walked to the window, arms crossed. You think showing me your view makes you honest? No, he said behind her, but it's a start. She turned around. Okay, so tell me why me, why the line? Why keep showing up? He looked at her like the answer hurt a little. Because you're the first person in years who doesn't want anything from me, and I've spent so long surrounded by people who only see my worth in numbers. You didn't ask what I did. You didn't try to impress me. You just saw me. Kara's breath caught. He stepped closer. I know I should have told you sooner, but I didn't want to lose whatever this is before it even started. She searched his face. Everything about this should feel unbelievable, but it didn't. It felt terrifyingly real. I'm not impressed by views, she whispered. I know. I don't care about money. I know that too. She looked at him long and hard. Then she said, I don't know what this is yet. Neither do I, he said. But I want to find out. And somehow, in that enormous, silent space filled with luxury and secrets, Kara didn't feel small anymore. She felt seen. Kara stood on the rooftop, her fingers curled tightly around the thin metal railing as the wind tugged at her jacket. Below, Manhattan glowed in a blur of lights and motion, but up here it was still, quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes when everything else has already been said. Behind her, the door eased open. I was starting to think you ghosted me, Nolan said, his voice lower than usual. She didn't turn. I needed air, I figured. The door clicked shut. She felt him step beside her, but he didn't speak, didn't reach for her, just waited. I didn't come here for the view, she said finally, her voice rougher than she liked. I know. Kara looked at him. His coat was open, collar turned up against the wind. His face was tired, not the kind of tired that comes from lack of sleep, but the kind that sinks into your bones when you're carrying too many things alone. You didn't deserve how I left, she said. You didn't owe me anything. I think I did. She turned to face him completely. You let me into your world and I panicked. I didn't even give you a chance to explain. He met her gaze. You didn't run because of what I have. You ran because you thought it would change what we were. She nodded once, jaw tight. I meant what I said that night. You're different, Kara. I've met people who chased the shine, the connections, the invitations, but you never reached for anything except honesty. You made me remember what it felt like to be seen without a filter. She watched the wind lift his hair slightly, the way his eyes never left hers. I'm not used to people saying things like that. I'm not used to meaning it, she exhaled, slow. Everything in my life has always been temporary. Jobs, apartments, relationships. I convinced myself it's better that way, that if you expect things to fall apart, it hurts less when they do. And now, I don't want this to be temporary. He stepped closer carefully, like he was waiting for her to bolt again. Then don't let it be. Kara looked up at him. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I, he said. But I'd rather figure it out with you than go back to pretending I'm fine on my own. She searched his face, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was standing in someone else's story. She felt like she was writing her own. I still have your painting, she whispered. He blinked. The cliff piece, I finished it. His brow lifted slightly. You said it wasn't for sale. It's not, but I want you to have it. Nolan stepped forward and gently took her hand. Are you sure? I don't want to keep holding it hostage to a version of me I've already outgrown. He traced his thumb along the side of her hand. Then I'll take care of it, like I will with you. The words landed heavier than she expected, not just sweet, true. She leaned into him then, her forehead resting lightly against his chest. You really waited in line for a croissant? I'd wait in 100 lines if it meant meeting you again. She laughed gently, the sound muffled against his jacket. You're ridiculous. Possibly, he said. But I'm also yours if you'll have me. She pulled back just enough to look at him. I will. Later that month, Nolan brought her to a private studio on the Upper West Side. It wasn't flashy or oversized, just quiet and filled with light. The lease had already been signed, her name on the door. You needed space to breathe, he said. Now you have it. Kara blinked hard. You didn't have to, I wanted to, he said. Not as a favor, as a foundation. She kissed him for that, not because of the gift, but because of how he gave it with no strings, no expectations, just belief. In the months that followed, everything changed. Galleries began calling. Articles were written. Her work sold not because of Nolan, but because she dared to show it. And through it all, he was there, not in front of her, not behind but beside. They didn't rush. There was no sudden proposal, no whirlwind wedding. Just two people choosing each other, over and over again. On a warm evening in late spring, they returned to the same sidewalk where it all began. The bakery was gone now, replaced by a shoe boutique with mirrored walls and too much perfume in the air. "I still think about that lemon scone," Kara said, slipping her hand into his. "I still think about the way you looked when you offered to save my spot," he replied. "Like you didn't know you were about to change my life." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Maybe I didn't." "I did," he said simply. When they walked away together, it wasn't dramatic, no crowd, no spotlight. Just two souls who found each other in the most ordinary moment and built something extraordinary from it. Kara stood barefoot in the middle of the sun-drenched studio, her hands streaked with ochre and raw umber, a half-finished canvas in front of her. The new space smelled like turpentine, old wood, and sunlight, and for the first time it felt entirely hers. She hadn't touched a brush in 3 days, not because the work wasn't calling, but because something else had been weighing heavier. She heard the elevator doors open behind her and didn't need to turn to know it was Nolan. Only he moved with that mix of purpose and restraint, like every step had already been considered twice. "I got your message," he said quietly, setting something down on the side table. She didn't face him. "I wasn't sure if you would come. I always come when it's you." She pressed her fingers into the paint, then wiped them on a towel. "I got offered a residency in Berlin." Silence. "When?" he asked. "June. It's 6 months." She finally turned, watching his expression closely. He didn't flinch, didn't try to talk her out of it. He just stepped closer, looking at her like he was memorizing every shift in her face. "Do you want to go?" he asked. "I think I do, but I don't want to leave this." "You're not leaving it," he said. "It's coming with you." "In here." He touched her chest gently, and here, he tapped his own. "I don't want distance to change us," she whispered. "It won't," he said, "because I'm not going to let it." She looked down. "I don't want you to wait for me." He tilted her chin up. "I'm not waiting, I'm living with you from wherever we are." Kara exhaled slowly, a deep release she hadn't known she was holding. "I needed to hear that," she said. "I know." They stayed quiet for a long moment before she asked, "What if I don't come back the same?" "You won't," he said, "and that's the point. You'll come back more you." She stepped into him then, her arms wrapping around his waist. He held her like he always did, firm, steady, without hesitation. "I love you," she said into his chest. "I know," he replied. "I love you more." She pulled back with a small laugh. "Don't start that competition again. You started it the day you gave me that painting," he said, brushing a speck of red from her cheek. They spent the next few weeks in a rhythm that felt like falling in love all over again, late nights at small jazz clubs, quiet mornings reading on opposite ends of his vast sofa, impulsive road trips to nowhere. They didn't talk about Berlin much, but it never left the space between them. It was a living truth they carried together. The night before she flew out, Nolan brought her to a rooftop garden in Chelsea. The space was strung with warm lights, and in the center was a white linen-draped table set for two. A string quartet played softly behind a wall of hedges. Kara blinked. "How did you? Does it matter?" he asked, offering his hand. She took it, laughing. "You're ridiculous. You say that like it's a bad thing." They dined under the stars, surrounded by jasmine and soft candlelight. Dessert came with a note folded into a tiny origami bird. She opened it and read silently, "You gave me color, you gave me breath. Come back when you're ready to paint the rest of forever with me." Her chest tightened. "You wrote this," he nodded. "I meant every word." She blinked quickly, then reached for him across the table. "You know that forever's already started, right?" "Yes," he said, voice low. "It started the moment you offered to hold my place in line. 6 months passed in a blur and a breath. Berlin was a storm of galleries, language barriers, unexpected inspiration, and lonely nights. But through it all, Nolan remained a constant. He flew in for her opening, sent her books with notes in the margins, called her every Sunday from the same spot on his balcony with the skyline behind him. When she returned to New York, she didn't go to her old apartment. She went straight to Nolan's. The door opened before she could knock. "Hi," she said. Welcome home, he replied, pulling her into his arms. They didn't speak for a while, just stood there, surrounded by everything familiar. Everything changed. Later, he led her out to the balcony where a small easel waited. On it, a blank canvas and a note in her handwriting she didn't remember leaving. Begin again. She turned to him, eyes wide. I found it tucked in your sketchbook, he said. I figured we could start something new. Together, she picked up the brush, dipped it into cobalt, and made the first stroke. Years unfolded like pages after that, slow, rich, unhurried. They traveled, built a collection of art and memories, filled their walls with color and their lives with laughter. Her work flourished, and so did his, though he spent more time investing in people than companies now. They married on a cliffside in Sicily, barefoot and windswept, with only their closest friends and a string quartet playing something soft and familiar. He didn't make a speech, just took her hands and said, "You are the greatest risk I ever took, and the best." And when they danced under the stars, it wasn't about the dress or the view or the guests. It was about them, two people who found everything they never knew they needed in the most ordinary moment. Love, they learned, is not always born in fireworks. Sometimes it begins in the quietest places, like a line for croissants, or a hand offered without expectation. And sometimes it becomes everything,